Okay, there we go. Well, friends, I've got here it's resurrection morning, but it's actually resurrection evening. So welcome to resurrection evening, the evening of Easter Day. Now, in the main services this Sunday, I've been asking people why they are here in church, because there are plenty of other things we could be doing this evening. And I mentioned this morning that I could have been at home, and you could have been at home too, with Netflix and chocolate eggs and whatever you've been doing today. But for some reason, you've decided to come to church this evening. Now, you might be here just to make Nan or Mum or someone else happy, and that's okay too. Maybe you come to church at Easter and Christmas, because that's what you do, and that's okay too. Maybe this church is your family church, and that's what brings you here today. Or maybe you don't really know why you're here, and you just want this to be over. Reverend Kim, can we move on and let this be over already so I can go home? Whatever it is that brings you here, you are welcome. Do you know, one of the main reasons that people leave their faith is because they don't get their questions answered. So people come to faith, they come to church, maybe they come as a child or they come as a young adult, and they have questions about Christianity and they're never really able to get a good answer. Well, I'm going to try and do a little bit of that in this sermon series I'm kicking off this weekend, and we're calling it Why Jesus Answers in Easter. I'm going to get to that in just a moment, but first I'm going to talk about a word that is tricky in our day, and that word is truth. Now, we hear on the news and hear in our lives that there's lots of types of truth. There's your truth and my truth. There's this truth and that truth. And when we say that type of truth, we're talking about truth with a lowercase t, a little t truth. But today, we're going to talk a little bit about capital T truth. Because I think all of us, deep in our hearts, as humans, have a desire to know the truth. What's real and what is not real. What is fake news and what is real news, right? I would say, and I would argue that you're here tonight or you're watching because something inside of you is looking for truth. But I wonder what brings you to the church. Why Christianity? Why the Anglican Church? There's plenty of religions around. And the funny part about this religion that we follow, this Christianity, is that it has probably the most outlandish and ridiculous claim that's ever been made of a religion. It says that a Jewish carpenter who was born 2,000 years ago was a traveling teacher, was a guy who really should have had no impact on humanity, was in actuality the Son of God, and not only that, he was crucified, died, and was buried. Now, if that's where the story ended, we would go, okay, that's just another person who was part of history, another teacher who was around in our midst, and that's where his following ended. But after that, Christianity goes on, and it says something even bolder. It says, not only did all that happen, but on the third day, this guy rose again from the dead. Something that isn't seen in our experience. Now, honestly, if I was up here trying to convince you that Christianity was true, I wouldn't start with that argument, because that sounds like a fairy tale. It is too weird to really begin with when we're talking about the Christian faith. It's too far-fetched. It sounds like a fairy tale. And you may be thinking, sure, Kim, how am I supposed to trust that story is even true? And it's okay if you're thinking that. Even if you've been a Christian your whole life, you've been a cradle Anglican, or you've just come to faith, or whatever it is, you can still think about those things. We don't leave our brain at the door of the Anglican Church. That's what I love about it. That's why I became an Anglican, because it encourages us to use our brain. Now, as I mentioned before, earlier, before the sermon, I'm not here to Bible bash anybody, because the truth doesn't need Bible bashing. It speaks for itself. Now, I'm a fellow truth seeker. I'm someone who joins you from here, at the front of the church, but in my heart, I join you guys who are on the search for truth. And here's a piece of this truth, friends. It's a bold claim, but here it is. The truth is that the resurrection of Jesus from the dead is the be-all and the end-all of the Christian faith. If Jesus Christ didn't rise from the dead, my priest and deacon friends, all the bishops from around the world, and myself should go and get another job, because there would be no point to this. There would be no building here if Jesus Christ didn't rise from the dead either. But we should just close the doors of our churches if the resurrection didn't actually happen, because that's the linchpin of Christianity. If that didn't happen, then as Paul writes, we are most to be pitied. People should be out in the town going, oh my God, those poor Christians up there on the hill in Bendolba, that's so sad. Let's pity them. That's what Paul says in that second reading. That's why I said it's a real cracker, that reading, because it actually says, if that is not true, then we should be the most pitied of all people. But it is true, and that's the scary and thrilling part of Christianity, is that it is true. There's no point trying to explain the resurrection away, or call it a myth, or a symbol, or even an inner resurrection. That we might say Jesus is alive in my heart. Part of that is true. We carry Christ with us as Christians. Of course it's true. But if Christ didn't rise from the dead in bodily form, then Christianity is a fraud. It's a joke. It should be pitied, and we should be laughed at. It's a big claim. It comes down to this, friends. If Jesus did rise from the dead, if it did happen, and I believe it did, because there's some good evidence for it outside of the Bible, if it did, then that means that Christ is the fullness of God's revelation. He is the truth. Now, we can either go, yeah, absolutely, I own that for myself, or we can go, not for me. Either of those things we are able to choose. We don't have to. God isn't forcing anybody to do anything. They're always an invitation. That's why I'm so big on invitational ministry in our church, because God invites us always. He never forces us to do anything. Now, friends, it wasn't long ago, just a year, or it's about 14 months now, that I left my old life as an English teacher. And those of us, there's one or two teachers in our midst out there, and they will tell you that, the pay's not too bad. I was doing okay as a single girl and a teacher. And I left it all to come and be an Anglican priest, to serve Dungog and the Dungog Shire, of course. And I had lots of people say to me, Kim, what is wrong with you? You're going out to work for an archaic institution that has no relevance in our lives. Doesn't it get you down to see empty churches? How can you give up your well-paying job to go out and be a priest? It has no relevance. The church is dying. Now, friends, don't you believe for a second that the church is empty or dying. That's garbage. Especially not our church. The parish of Dungog is definitely not dying, but certainly the church universal is not dying. God's not finished with us yet. I said that out at our St. Peter's in the Paddock sermon last week. God isn't finished with us. He's not finished. The church is not dead. And the reason is this, friends. Every person that comes to church in the year 2023, everybody here, is here because they want to be here. They chose to come here. I have a friend who said to me, Kim, it's not about numbers. It's not about who comes through the door. It's this amount of people decided to go to church today, and that is a win. In the end stages of Christendom, that is a win. That is amazing. It's a miracle. Actually, it is a miracle to see you all here today, because there is no social compulsion for anybody to come to church anymore. Not like it used to be. That's what you used to do. And our churches were full. They had plenty of people in them. But they were physically full, but were they spiritually full? Because I've spoken to a lot of people who have said, Kim, I used to go to church years ago with my partner, and my partner really believed they were a Christian or they were an Anglican, but I wasn't, or other way around. But they still went because that's what their partner wanted from them. It was a bit of a compulsion. They had to go. But it's not like that anymore. And that means that the church is spiritually full. It's full with people who want to be here. It's filled with people who say yes to God. And it's the result of talking about it openly, talking about Christianity and Jesus openly. And we call that evangelism, of course. And that's what unites me to you. We're all truth seekers. And we're here because we had a choice. I had a choice too. I didn't have to come and be a priest. I'm glad I did. I enjoy it. But I didn't have to. I could have said no to God. God, what are you serious? I'm not going to go be a priest. And I did say that to him for a long time before I finally said yes. But I don't have to. None of us are compelled. We come because we're invited and we say yes to the invitation. We have a choice to come and see what this crazy sounding itinerant rabbi said 2,000 years ago and wonder why the movement didn't die out with his crucifixion. It should have. You kill off the leader. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to suppress this Jesus thing before it got out of hand, and it's all around the world now. But that's what should have happened, but it didn't, because God was behind that. And if God's behind it, nothing's going to stop it, friends. And that is a full church. That's a full church. That's a spiritually full church. And that's the kind of church I want to be a part of. Now, friends, next week we're beginning a series, as I mentioned, through the sermons at Main Church at Dungog and Clarencetown. We're going to call it Why Jesus Answers in Easter. And I'm going to answer some big questions because I get asked questions a lot and I love questions, so don't ever feel afraid to ask me those questions. But things like, if God is so good, why do bad things happen? Why do bad things happen to good people? Because God is good, isn't he? God is love, and that is true. All of that's true. So why are there bad things happening? Can I really believe that Jesus Christ rose from the dead? Is there any evidence for that? I came to faith in Jesus through this, through my head, and I had to get it down to my heart eventually and actually fall in love with God. But originally I came to the church through my brain. It was through logic and reasoning and going, there is really good evidence that this is the truth. What about, isn't the whole story of Jesus made up to give money and power to his followers? Oh, it's my favourite question. Isn't it a big conspiracy theory? Isn't Reverend Kim just up the front here, getting rich from being a priest? That's not true. Didn't the disciples all live rich lives, after scheming everybody and telling them this guy rose from the dead and they lived off the money from that? Spoiler alert, no. That is not what happened. We'll get to that though. How can I trust the Bible when it has so many translations? Doesn't have 1,000 translation errors. If you are seeking answers, this is the sermon series for you. So it's going to go for 7 weeks, because there are 7 weeks in Easter in the Anglican Church. And then we're going to have a very special guest preacher, God willing, at Pentecost. She's going to come and sum up all of that for us. So if you're seeking answers, join us next week. We're kicking it off. And I'll be giving you some hard evidence that Jesus Christ did rise from the dead, and evidence that's outside of the Bible. So it's not just me going, hey, there's this in the Bible and that in the Bible. There's some other stuff that's out there too that talks about this Jesus guy. It's outside of the Bible. He is a historical character. So friends, we gather as truth seekers to celebrate the impossible today. We're sitting in a paddock. It's St. Peter's in the paddock, celebrating the impossible. We come together to bear witness to the fact that we stand in the light of truth. We don't have to be ignorant anymore. We don't have to wonder, is there a God out there that loves me? We know that there is a God out there that loves me because we have Jesus Christ who came into the world, died and rose again. That same Christ, that Son of God, he took on our flesh. He died like a common Roman criminal, but he was raised from the dead in order to reunite us to the living God, to the true God, to the God of life. And the beauty of living today, friends, the beauty of following Jesus, following in the way of Jesus today, is that we have the choice now to go, that's for me, or to go, not yet. Because I always think most people are not yet, not just yet. Yes or not yet. So friends, I think that is a truth worth celebrating. Amen.